Hey everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate demo for the piece I call Layla. Now I know it's been a while since I've put out a new video. As always, trying to do more, but sometimes life just gets in the way. For this one though, I just wanted to sort of talk through. This is the first of three that were part of a series. I just call them the Pink Background series. They don't have a fancier name than that. As you all know, if you've followed my channel for a long time or followed me on various platforms, I'm a sucker for the color pink. So I wanted to do something that was in that. Well, it originally started because I wanted it to be this kind of synthwavy vibe, but then it ended up going much more just kind of like neon pink and like weird skin tones and weird colors all around. This was the first in that series, and you can kind of see because it's the first, I'm still feeling my way through it. So in a second here, you're going to see this rough sketch start becoming like a natural skin tone, natural color kind of look. And then I end up color shifting all of that to where her like skin is like blue. And then I start flattening her that way. And then I end up not really liking that either. And I end up eventually ending up on the color scheme that you see. So the line art for this is almost completely done because whenever I know that I'm going to be doing some rendering, the lines are usually looser. You can also see the tattoos. I planned on the tattoos from the beginning, but I didn't plan on what the individuals were going to be. I just knew that I wanted this particular character to be pretty covered. In fact, that ends up being a theme of the series, is that the characters are pretty covered in tattoos. Here's some of that color shifting I was talking about, and then I start flatting. Once I get the flatting done, I believe is when I do the color shift though, because I'm just not totally in love with that palette, even though I do like that sort of like pink, yellow, blue combo. I just didn't feel like it had quite what I was going for, or at least what I was into, I should say, because I didn't really know what I was going for at this point. Similar to the way tattoos happen in real life, whenever I do characters that are heavily tattooed, I usually start with them, I just paint them as if they have no tattoos, and then the tattoos end up being incorporated later. That's basically what ends up happening here. Because, of course, tattoos are within the layers of the skin. I'll just keep it really simple. And so they are going to react to all of the same lighting that the skin would anyhow. So usually what I end up doing is I do a bunch of the rendering, usually all of the rendering on the skin. Then the tattoos come in, and the tattoos sit on like above the skin flat layer, but still underneath all of the lighting layers, so that they're impacted similarly to the way the rest of the skin would be. So that's why you're not going to see the actual tattoos make an appearance until later into the piece. Something you might have also noticed, and it's coming to my mind because I'm doing the eyelashes here, is that her eyes are larger in the final than they are at this stage. When I started, it really wasn't a conscious decision, but I did go with like a smaller eye, but it just wasn't giving me quite the pop that I was looking for. And then once I moved on to the other women in this lineup, they all had slightly bigger eyes. And then I was like, oh, I should go back to the first one and give her slightly bigger eyes as well. So you're going to see some like last minute in the time lapse sort of like reconstruction of the eyes. I actually don't do it like sort of, I guess, holistically using all the flats and resizing the flats and repainting it. I just duplicate everything onto a new layer and sort of go from there. But we'll talk about that when we get there. You'll notice here now we've got this skin tone that's popping up because I ended up shifting her skin tone around. And then the reason why her skin is this lighter purple is because, or I should, lighter purple than the other arm right now, is because when I lowered the opacity on that in order to start doing some of the rendering, I realized I liked that color more. So I end up committing to that color eventually, or at least something similar to that color. The ideas for pieces like this are usually from a cobbling together of various reference. Always remember that reference is your friend, especially on anything that you don't draw on a regular basis. So like if you're designing a character who has a specific job or something like that, and their design ends up relying on communicating that, lean into your reference. In this case, for all three of the ladies in these three pieces, I used like a lot of fashion reference just because, you know, I'm sort of like your average dude. I'm not exactly a, you know, fashion expert. So trying to reference trends is always very helpful. The phase that I'm in right now of the rendering process is I've got my flats all laid down. The flats, in case you're new to this or new to this channel, are basically just individual layers that are usually kind of a single color that is a section of the piece. So in the case of this one, you can see, because of the way I've got the layers like lowered in opacity here, her back arm, the arm that's distant from us, her torso, her neck, her face, her ears, so to speak, are all their own layer. And then her arm that's closer to us, her top, her hair, her eyes, etc., are all separate layers. Those are the flats. And the reason they're called flats is because they're usually just flat colors, and then you're going to be applying some amount of rendering on top of them. This is not the only way to paint. There are infinite ways that you can paint whatever you want, but it's the way that I kind of developed because of the layer limitations of Procreate. I drew this a while ago now. I painted this a while ago. I'm going to try and play catch up on the channel, but you know how those promises go. But this is a while ago, and I actually just got a new iPad that has like virtually no layer limit now. It still does, but like it's not as relevant. So I have been doing slightly different methods lately just because I can now. But for this one and a lot of pieces over the last few years, I adapted my style slightly, or I should say my methods slightly, to embrace the layer limit. And so what I'm doing here is I've got flats for all of these individual pieces, and then I have like a folder that sits above the folder of flats, and that has things like shadows and highlights and any other type of like embellishment that needs to go into something depending on the piece and what the needs are. So what you're seeing here is a shadow layer that is kind of like a pale purple, if I remember correctly. It's like a really, yeah, you just saw it right there. It actually just flipped on for a second, so you could go back like 5 seconds and see that. That color is on a layer set to multiply, and that layer is what I'm doing right now for sort of my ambient occlusion shadows right now, what you're seeing here. And so that's being done with my turpentine brush, painting it and smudging it with my turpentine brush, which should be linked down below in the description if you want to go grab that brush set. It's free. And so what I'm doing is I'm painting in some of the paint. It might get painted in a little heavy, and then I'm softening it and rounding out the forms and sort of dragging it where I need to using the smudging. It's kind of being done all across the piece. I actually can't tell right now which section I'm on, but that's the general method. So you've got a folder filled with flats, which are single color usually, layers that are the different sections of the piece. Then on top of that, you have a folder that has your lighting. So what you're seeing right now here is I'm painting in the cast shadows. So this is another new layer that is set to multiply, usually using the same color as the AO shadows, but these are getting put in just like really heavy, really bold, so that they really read as this strong cast shadow. So what you end up having is like a form shadow that's communicating the forms of the various surfaces, and then you've got this cast shadow that's coming off of anywhere where it makes sense. So this is kind of like a fashion photo in a way. This character is like lit directly on, which is why you're seeing this really immediate cast shadow, like for instance where her pectoral is casting onto like the underside of her tricep, or where her jawline is casting onto her neck, or onto her arm. That's all just like a direct shadow that would be caused by some sort of a light that's kind of like in front and like a little bit up to the right, our right, her left. Another layer that I'll do, which you'll see coming in right now, is this kind of like rounding layer that I call it, sometimes called rounding, I don't know, whatever, call it whatever you want, but it's basically a soft airbrushy kind of shadow to help turn the form on the darker side of the figure. So you can really see it on her arm that's kind of up. You can see that kind of like softening happening on that side, on the left side there. I believe now we're moving into highlights. The highlights on this one is kind of more of like a peachy color than what I would normally use. It's set to a it's set to normal, and it's just a really, really low opacity. You can see it right there, kind of like blink on and off as I'm moving through and hitting certain spots. On this one, I kind of did like a soft lighting at first, just sort of like a softer highlight. It's still painterly. You can still see the strokes pretty boldly there. But then I went in after that and did this layer that you're seeing kind of go in, which is a little bit more precision, a little bit brighter, just trying to sell the forms of this lady's topology. And you can see there we've got a little brighter on like the apex of the shoulder. We got a little bit on the nose, things like that. Now this is a separate layer where I just wanted to sell the metallics of her hoop earrings, so you get like a little extra pop there. We also have a little bit of a vignetting on her whole body. That's what that kind of like darkening was that you saw encroaching. Now we're on to the tattoo portion. This is going to go pretty fast at first. So this starts off with me just kind of roughing it all in. Some of it is kind of standard by the books tattoo iconography or imagery. Some of it is like a unique mix up on or mashup or whatever on something that maybe is like kind of standard, but then we're doing like something a little different with it. And other things are just, a fresh design in the sense that it's not necessarily speaking to any tropes, but it's just designed to look like a tattoo. I have a good number of tattoos, and I really care about nailing the tattoos on a character. I think that there are instances where a character might have semi-generic tattoos, but I personally like them to speak to the character in some way and seem somewhat logical, actually seem like something that they might get. Tattoos, just like other elements of character design, are a really big way to express who that character is and what's important to them and all that stuff. The way you dress a character, the way they hold themselves, and then the types of tattoos that they get. Anytime I see a design that has just sort of like a generic tattoo design, it kind of drives me crazy because that's like a blown opportunity to talk about the character a little bit. Now, this is a little different here. This isn't like, say, you're drawing the character for a sci-fi video game and you want to give them a tattoo that speaks about them. This is much more like this is a character who is being featured up close and, again, kind of in this like fashion spread. So we get to focus on the tattoos a lot more because they're kind of a highlight of the piece. You have just this woman from only sort of like the mid-rib cage up, and then her face, which is capturing most of your attention, and then she has these elaborate tattoos all over. And so since it's kind of a showcase, you want to get in there and try to make them look like a bunch of tattoos that somebody would actually get. By the way, I'm using a brand new mic, so I hope this sounds good. I'm still futzing with all the settings and everything, and trying to get used to it, but hopefully it sounds better than the little like inline microphone that I used to use. So let's talk about some of these tattoos real quick. We've got that one right there. That corn dog one is actually one that's on my arm, as well as that little kind of like sandworm squiggle that you see go into her right ditch right there. I have it in my left ditch actually. And then a bunch of all the others are essentially just randos. Oh wait, no, actually I'm going to change out that shoulder one in a second for one also that I have. Not the shoulder that's towards us, but the shoulder that's away from us. The rest of them are all designed on the fly for this piece. And some of them are kind of like trying to speak to the character specifically. Some of them are just kind of a little bit of filler, I'll admit. There's a couple of spots here or there where it's like, oh, okay, this is going to roll off her form into the distance, so let's just put something there that kind of implies something is over there. Okay, so I'm going to try and zoom in on all these so you can kind of see the designs as they're happening. Here we've just got kind of a coffin tattoo, but we got a fly flying out of it. Nothing, no corpse inside, and then it just says whoops. I always like a little bit of humor in my tattoo, if possible. The principles that I'm trying to follow with this is largely just like what can be done with if it was just a black and gray tattoo. And I even try, especially now with the setting that didn't exist when I did this piece, but with the setting in Procreate now where you can save brush sizes. So you've got like a brush and then you save these kind of like little ticks here or there that show you where you can save like, oh, it's 5% big or whatever. That helps out a lot with things like this, because you want to show that kind of like semi-consistent needle size. That doesn't mean obviously that a tattoo artist can't change needles, but it kind of helps with the scale of the overall piece. When you've got a really consistent line thickness for a character's tattoos, it's kind of like putting a dollar bill next to something, where it suddenly the scale becomes very apparent. This stuff that's happening in the bottom left is what I was talking about with this implies that something is there and it's going off and it's part of a bigger design, but who knows what. That one is clearly just like a bottle, but those designs that are like all the way in the bottom left, who knows. That thing that's coming off her left ditch, who exactly knows. We've got the flower on her elbow. That's pretty standard. It's just kind of like a radial flower. We've got this diamond kind of on her ribs. We've got something implying that there is maybe like a battle royale or something happening on her back. So we've got a snake, we've got some sort of a wing, but then we've got like a claw with like lightning coming off of it. Who knows what all that is, but it kind of makes you wonder what the rest of that back piece looks like. I didn't do a ton of distortion on this to really make it look like it's like rounding off on her back. I honestly just didn't think that that was going to have that much value. Now we're jumping up to her throat, where we've got a lioness tattoo. Fairly standard, just sort of front on big cat type thing. This one, I think you saw when I was doing the roughs a minute ago that this one was done with the symmetry tool, and then I warped it to fit her throat, and then I went in and here now I'm just drawing it on her throat. Something that I find really easy and it's good for capturing the overall design of these tattoos is sometimes doing them broken out, and then you put them on the form and warp them in the way that makes sense, and then you redraw them once they're there in order to not make it look too artificial, like it's almost like it's textured on a 3D object. It kind of makes it feel like a anime from like the early 2000s, late 90s, when they were toying with 3D, and I try not to have that happen. So then that's why this whole piece, even though some of these tattoos are kind of like warped on here, I then redraw them anyways, just so that it feels like it's a more natural part of the piece. This design is just bonkers, honestly. I don't know. I think I was looking up like a bunch of reference, and I just went with this kind of like amalgamation of a bunch of stuff. I'm a sucker for an all-seeing eye, but I try not to do them all the time. So this is almost like just like a variation on that for fun. This was like a music tattoo that I came up with on the fly. I don't actually love it, but for some reason it just kind of, I feel like it does work with the space. It's like a bunch of cassette tapes that have the ribbon going across all of them into this sort of like little arrangement. Here she has a tattoo above her eyebrow that just says indifferent. It's slightly then warped to fit the space a little bit better. Here she's got a classic armpit rose tattoo, but trying to figure it out in this context where it's like it's kind of a little folded up and the perspective is a little weird. I just tried to do my best to like imply what it was supposed to be and not worry too much about like truly nailing the distortion that would come there. This tattoo here is one that I've actually considered getting myself, which is just Cowboy Curtis, but with a Morpheus quote, I can only show you the door. This one, I actually did the line work that's sitting there on a separate canvas, but I didn't bother saving it out. I don't even know if I still have that canvas, but that was just a separate canvas where I wanted to work out like copying a photo of Larry Fish in this exact pose, and then kind of making it a little bit more tattoo designy and going from there. You can see though with a lot of the ones on this piece, it's like I said, it's all black and gray, largely line driven, occasionally using some shading here and there, but I just wanted it to be really bold and legible. And since she is fairly rendered, I kind of thought it was just nice to have most of the tattoos being kind of like flat and simple. There are some areas like you can see right there where I wanted to separate Cowboy Curtis's skin from his hair just to give it like a little bit more clarity as to what's happening there, but other than that, not a whole lot of action. Here's just like a skull with a rose in its mouth. Here is something hinting at a bigger chest piece, some sort of a clawed wing type piece here, but we don't know what the rest of that design looks like. Here we're back to the arm. Here's the, it's hard to tell that it's a sandworm, but the intention is that it's a sandworm because it's modeled after a tattoo I have. Just a sandworm in her right ditch. Then we've got like a wristband that is then going to get like a flower. There you go, right there, cut out of it. This is actually lightly modeled after some ankle bands my wife has. Not exactly the same, but similar. This corn dog tattoo I have, although mine is in color. This one is simplified for this piece. I'm a big corn dog fan. Here is some form of a sparrow or a swallow, sort of flying with some text next to it. And then this one is a band-aid over the elbow with a lucky horseshoe. And then the text says, "Youch," because if you have your elbow tattooed, you know that that isn't the most pleasant feeling. So I just thought it'd be kind of fun if it was literally a tattoo that just referenced how much it hurt to get the tattoo. I haven't gotten my right knee done yet, and I may do something similar for my right knee because my left knee was absolutely painful. Do you have any tattoos? Hit like and comment down below if you... So then this one is almost wrapped. And now we move here. This was just a little gap filler. I don't even know what this is. It looks like it's an accordion or something. Throwing a person's name somewhere is always a good way to sort of like hint at some sort of a backstory. Who knows? Is that a sister or a mom or a friend or a lover or a whatever? Who knows? But now there's a name there. This is me quickly warping a tattoo I already have and just kind of tracing it because I wasn't liking the kind of like demon face that I had before. It just didn't really make sense to me on this particular character. This one probably ultimately makes even less sense because it's a tattoo for me for something that I have that actually means a lot to me. But sometimes throwing my own tattoos into these pieces is like a good way to throw some more ownership into them. The Pink Hair Girl book that I did has a few of my own tattoos across the designs of those characters as well. So it's just kind of a fun little thing, especially when you recontextualize them. This one is in the same location as mine, although mine's on the other shoulder. But it's sometimes fun to like take something that maybe was designed for like a bicep and move it somewhere else or whatever. So here it's also fun because mine is also full color, and so this is cool to try and like reinterpret it like this. Okay, so we're out of tattoo land. We're doing some lighting stuff. We've got some bloom around the figure. That's just done by duplicating the background, blurring it, duplicating the background, cutting her out of it, and then blurring it and setting it on top of everything. Then we're also going to be putting like a little bit of a harder rim light as well in here. So we've got like a bloom situation as well as a little bit of rim light. This is that moment in my own work where I'm staring, trying to figure out what I was working on. Here, I'm just amping up some of the lighting a little bit more. So you can see now with all of those lighting layers turned on top of the tattoos, even though this whole piece is a little ethereal and it's not really like true materials, she doesn't have the right skin tone, texture, the shirt doesn't, the hair doesn't, the tattoos don't, but we're trying to still imply some of those same interactions. So it's almost like a material ratio. It's like I'm still trying to maintain the relationship, the ratio of how these different things are impacting each other while still trying to imagine them in a fantastical way. So here you can see I'm like struggling with how I want to actually do this rim light. You know, there's like a million ways to skin this cat, and it's like, how are we going to do it this time? Eventually I end up landing on the one that I was happiest with at the time. And this one isn't any type of like fanciness with any layers or anything. It's just sampling the color in the background, painting it, lowering the opacity of it. That thing you saw where I drew those two big white lines all of a sudden, that was me just double checking the lengths of her arms. I got all the way to this point and then was like, is my anatomy okay? Are my proportions okay? And they're fine. At least they were fine enough for me at the time to say we're good and like kind of move on. So now we're bringing this in for a landing, adding noise to the background and just making sure all the levels are good. And you can see that eye tweak that just popped in right there at the last second. And we're done. This is Layla. I named all the characters after I did them all. I thought giving them all names was going to be a good idea. I also darkened her shirt a little bit so it didn't stand out so much, so that we're focusing on her eyes and like her face the most. So I'm happy with the way this came out. I'm happy with all the ladies in this particular lineup, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.